For decades, one of the most common watches on Earth has been a small plastic digital watch. It costs about $15. You can buy it almost anywhere. Street markets, online stores, supermarkets. Most people never think twice about it. But inside intelligence reports, the same watch has appeared again and again. Not because it is rare, but because investigators kept noticing it in places they were already looking. The watch is called the Casio F-91W. At first glance, it seems completely ordinary. A simple plastic case. A small digital display. 3 buttons. An alarm. A stopwatch. Nothing about it looks unusual. And yet, over time, this tiny watch somehow became part of a much larger story. A story involving global technology, intelligence investigations, and the strange patterns analysts sometimes notice. The question that eventually emerged was surprisingly simple. Why this watch? To understand that question, you first have to understand just how common this watch really is. The F-91W is everywhere. Students wear it to school. Workers wear it on construction sites. Drivers check it while waiting at traffic lights. Across cities and villages all over the world, millions of people rely on this same simple device to keep track of time. It isn't expensive. It isn't luxurious. But it is reliable. And that reliability made it incredibly popular. In fact, the watch quietly became one of the most widely worn watches ever produced. You can see it on wrists in Asia, Europe, Africa, and the Americas. It appears in classrooms, factories, offices, and airports. It became something rare in the modern world. A piece of technology that was both extremely simple and extremely universal. But this global popularity also created something unexpected. Because when a product becomes this common, it can begin appearing in places no one planned. To understand how the F-91W became so widespread, we need to go back several decades. Back to the digital revolution. During the 1970s and 1980s, the watch industry went through one of the biggest transformations in its history. For centuries, watches had been mechanical. Tiny gears and springs working together to keep time. But quartz technology changed everything. Electronic watches could suddenly measure time more accurately than mechanical watches. And they could be produced much more cheaply. Companies across the world began racing to create digital watches. One of the most important companies in this race was Casio. Casio focused on something different from traditional watchmakers. Instead of luxury, they focused on accessibility. Their goal was simple. Create technology that ordinary people could afford. And digital watches turned out to be the perfect product. In 1989, Casio introduced a watch that embodied this philosophy perfectly. The F-91W. It wasn't designed to impress collectors. It was designed to work. The watch had a simple rectangular display. A stopwatch function. An alarm. A small backlight for viewing the time in the dark. And a battery that could last for years. The design was lightweight and durable. The price was incredibly low. And that combination made the watch spread rapidly across the world. Factories could produce huge numbers of them. Stores could sell them cheaply. And customers trusted that the watch would simply keep working. Year after year. For many years, the F-91W remained exactly what it was meant to be. An affordable everyday watch. But in the early 2000s, something unusual happened. After the September 11th attacks, intelligence agencies began analyzing enormous amounts of information. Captured equipment. Training manuals. Interrogation reports. Investigators were searching for patterns. Anything that might reveal how certain networks operated. And occasionally, small details would appear repeatedly. Sometimes it was a type of phone. sometimes a particular route, and sometimes a piece of equipment. In several reports, analysts noticed the same digital watch appearing in certain contexts. The Casio F-91W. One reason the watch appeared in these discussions was because digital watches can function as simple timers. The alarm inside a watch can trigger an electrical signal. In basic electronic circuits, that signal can be used to activate other components. This meant that a cheap digital watch could potentially act as a timing mechanism. But it's important to understand something. The F-91W was not unique in this ability. Many digital watches can do the same thing. The reason this particular model appeared in reports was likely much simpler. It was cheap, reliable, and available almost everywhere. When equipment needs to be simple and replaceable, those qualities matter. Investigators examining training materials connected to groups like Al-Qaeda sometimes noticed references to inexpensive digital watches. In those environments, equipment often had to meet specific requirements. It had to be inexpensive, easy to obtain, and easy to replace. The F-91W fit those requirements perfectly. But once analysts noticed the watch appearing in certain contexts, it became part of a broader investigation. They began asking whether the watch itself might represent some kind of signal. In intelligence analysis, patterns are everything. Investigators rarely rely on a single piece of evidence. Instead, they examine connections between many different signals. Travel routes, financial records, communication patterns, equipment. But patterns can be misleading. Because sometimes a pattern appears simply because something is extremely common. And the F-91W was one of the most common watches on Earth. This created a strange problem. The same watch appearing in intelligence reports was also appearing on millions of ordinary wrists every day. Which meant the watch itself couldn't prove anything. By the 2000s, the F-91W had become something unique. A global object. In cities across the world, you could see the same watch on completely different people. Students, drivers, office workers, tourists, athletes. Collectors even began praising the watch for its simplicity. In a world filled with increasingly complex technology, the F-91W remained refreshingly basic. It did exactly one thing. It told the time. And it did that extremely well. As the internet grew, discussions about the watch began appearing online. Some people were fascinated by its history. Others were curious about the intelligence reports mentioning it. Forums and articles debated the question. Why did this particular watch keep appearing in certain investigations? But the more researchers looked into the story, the clearer something became. The watch itself wasn't mysterious. It was simply everywhere. Modern intelligence work relies heavily on data analysis. Analysts study huge amounts of information searching for patterns. But patterns alone are never enough. Context always matters. An object as common as a digital watch cannot identify a person. It cannot reveal intent. And it certainly cannot explain a story by itself. Which means the F-91W was never really the main story. It was just one small detail inside a much larger system of investigation. More than 3 decades after its release, the Casio F-91W is still being produced. Still being sold. And still being worn by millions of people around the world. It remains one of the simplest watches ever made. Lightweight. Accurate. Reliable. Despite the rumors and stories that sometimes surround it, the watch itself has never changed. It still does exactly what it was designed to do. Tell the time. Sometimes the most interesting stories come from the most ordinary objects. Not because the object itself is special, but because of where it appears. and the questions people begin asking when they notice it. In the end, the F-91W isn't really a mystery. It's simply a watch. But its journey across the world shows how even the simplest technology can end up connected to stories no one could have predicted. All from a small plastic device that costs $15. And a question that continues to spark curiosity. Why this watch?